Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be going over the Naxx PvP Prio for a rogue. And I think this video is actually going to be really helpful to a lot of you because I'm going to be pointing out a lot of items that are actually really good for PvP that no one really cares about in terms of rating. And I really do think if you take some of my advice on what items to skip over and what items to focus on, I do think it's actually tangible that you get everything you want from Naxx, and you won't even need a crazy amount of DKP or really high profile in your loot council guild or whatever it takes to get the best items there. I really do think by focusing on the right items and skipping over a lot of the highly contested raid items, you can actually really put yourself in a good spot. So that's the goal of this video. I also wanted to mention that when ranking these items and talking about how good they are for PvP, I want to let you guys know that I did actually finish my PvP sim that I have been working on. So a lot of the information that I'm describing here is actually from a PvP sim, and it falls in line with other spreadsheets and programs I've written in the past to approximate damage. So I will be talking about more stuff that I have learned from the sim. So that will include some openers that I didn't realize were possible that the sim found. So actually like how to play your character in openers coming from stealth as a rogue. Also, particularly going into detail about Gressel versus servo arm. I'm gonna have a video on that. Video going over the trinkets in the game and how good they are for PvP. And then also a video going over the different set bonuses in the game. So stay tuned for that. But let's get into the PvP Prio. The first thing I want to talk about is a main hand. It's really important to get a main hand. It's way more important than in raiding to have a good main hand, because in PvP, a large portion of your damage is coming from the weapon. And so you don't have a bunch of attack power and stats from all world buffs and consumes and stuff. So it really is important to have a weapon. And I really want to stress that it's more important than anything else. And my recommendation for you is to use all of your item priority, all of your DKP on a weapon on the main hand. Don't worry about the offhand. Don't worry about any other slot. None of that matters. Go for a main hand. This is where we're going to be spending. The rest of the video, I'm going to be going over items that people don't care about as much that are good for PvP, but this is where you need to go for, the good stuff, right? This is what you're spending your DKP on. This is what you're in a loot council guild. This is what you bring up as what you really want. And this is going to be a main hand weapon. That's all. The most important thing. You want to get Gressel, King's Fall, or servo arm. Those are your goals. Now, if you're like brand new to a guild or you don't have very much DKP, and even though you're not going to be going for a lot of highly contested items, if you still can't get one of these premier main hands, at that point you can go for Castigator or Naxxramas Fang. But just keep in mind, they're actually worse than AQ items. So Naxxramas Fang is worse than Death Sting, and Castigator is actually worse than the Karaji Ripper in PvP because of the speed, because this is 2.6 and Karaji Ripper is 2.8. So just, you can settle for these, but I really would recommend getting one of these three weapons for your main hand as your number one priority. Now let's talk about these in particular. King's Fall is not really too complicated. It's the same speed as both Naxxramas Fang and Death Sting. While it doesn't have stamina, it has decent stats. Well, very good stats, but not as good in PvP as they are in PvE. However, it just hits hard. The main thing to aim for as a dagger rogue anyway, but a little less important. There's more replaceable options. The difference between King's Fall and Naxxramas Fang is a little bit smaller than, for example, one of the premier hemo weapons in something like Castigator. So keep that in mind, that while King's Fall is really, really good and it's your main focus as a dagger rogue in PvP, it's not as big as a void. Now, when it comes to Gressel versus servo arm, I am going to have a video dedicated to the difference between the two. For purposes of Prio, most guilds, it's going to be a lot easier to get the servo arm than Gressel. Well, I say most guild. In every single guild, it's going to be easier to get the servo arm than Gressel. And in some guilds, especially on Horde side, servo arm is actually very easy to get. And it's only rogues who PvP that are going to want this in horde guilds. In alliance guilds, you might have run-ins with other humans, like human warriors and stuff, but generally speaking, the servo arm is going to be a lot easier to get than Gressel. Now, which is actually better though? It's actually very close. And so in a lot of cases, I would say servo arm is definitely better value because it's much easier to get. And with that said though, we're not going to be talking about a lot of other stuff that are, that's going to matter anyway. So if you really do want Gressel, it also is very good. Like I said, there's a whole video on these two. It's complex, the differences between the two. Basically, Gressel does more damage in a vacuum. Servo arm does a little bit less damage. It is very close. However, it introduces nature damage, which ignores armor. So it changes kind of how you do damage, making you a little more powerful against plate and mail armored targets and people with shields, because you're going through their armor with the nature damage. But the proc can also have downsides as well if you're trying to do shenanigans with saps and stuff. So long and the short of it is they're very close. Go with the one you prefer in that you can get. If you cannot get Gressel, it's much better to be first on servo arm for PvP than like fourth on Gressel and be waiting forever for the item. The main reason I think that would compel someone to go Gressel over servo arm would be the fact that it is very good in raiding. And the main reason to go servo arm over Gressel is that it is much easier to get. Those are, to me, the most compelling reasons. When you're looking at the actual damage of the item, it gets very specific as to which situations, one is better than the other. But just know that they are both very, very good. And I would really recommend trying to get one. Next, I mentioned him a little bit. Castigator, it's worse than Karaji Ripper. Max's Fang, worse than Death Sting. But if you absolutely cannot get these items, you're going to want to still go for one of these, because like I said, a main hand is way more important than everything else. And even if you don't get the best one, it's better to take the second or third or fifth best weapon than it is to go with a minor upgrade for a cloak or something. Next, let's go into the big upgrades. So you got Claw the Claw the Frostworm. This is actually a really nice weapon. It is the best offhand in the game except for Thunder Fury. Fast speed, good stats. It's just really good, and it's usually not very contested. So a really great pickup that is not going to cost you a lot of DKP. It's not going to be something that's crazily contested. Great item, and shouldn't cause you trouble to pick up. Next, we've got Slayer's Crest. Now, this item, I personally actually would not recommend you get. The only reason I mentioned it is because if you do not have Earthstrike, if you do not have Jam Gabar, if you do not have some damage-dealing trinket that you can activate, if you have nothing, I would recommend, getting Slayer's Crest is going to be a big upgrade for you, but a lot of people are going to have something they can press. Like even Zandalari Hero Medallion, just existing, I think reduces the value of this item a little bit. This item is going to be better for sure, but the main pro of Slayer's Crest is that it has 64 attack power permanently. That's why it's good for raiding, because in a 2-minute fight, you have the big attack power boost, but then the rest of the fight, you've got a nice attack power gain. But the reason why I think this is much less good in PvP is because you're constantly cycling out trinkets. You're going to be switching to reflectors, PvP trinkets, nets, all kinds of gadgets. I really don't think leaving Slayer's Crest in your second trinket slot for 10 minutes is going to be the best way to play. However, if you are someone who doesn't change your trinkets much in PvP, or if you don't have a good trinket for offense in PvP, Slayer's Crest would be a good pickup. It's better than Kiss of the Spider in PvP, so I would go for this one instead. But I would recommend neither. Personally, if you are a PvP only player, I would pass them both, and I would focus on other items. And simply that's because Earthstrike is so close to this, and I just don't think it's worth picking up. Next, we've got kind of medium upgrades. Again, Might of the Scourge, you might not necessarily even want to go for this item, especially if you're swapping out different shoulder pieces, which you might be. There's some situations where Death Dealer set is worth using over Bone Scythe, and there's some situations where Night Slayer is worth using. Again, I'll have a video on that. But if you're not set in stone on what pair of shoulders you want to use, I wouldn't bother picking this up. Even if you have tier 3, if you swap shoulders out, it's again you're going to lose the value of the item. And if you're not using Death Dealer shoulders, obviously you can't get the set bonus. And as Night Slayer, if you're not using the shoulders, it means you're losing a lot of stats somewhere else, and it almost makes up for having Might of the Scourge on in the first place. So hopefully that makes sense. If you're swapping out sets, it's going to have a little reduced value. I wouldn't value this super highly. I think a lot of in raid, crit is better anyway, so a lot of raiders are going to value this one higher than you might for PvP. So just keep that in mind. But it does exist if you're looking for extra things to improve your character. Next, let's talk about necks. Now, for a lot of you guys, you're probably using the neck from Onyxia, or the neck from AQ20, or the neck from Nefarian Quest. If you have any of those necks, you're going to get a nice, decent upgrade by going to either Sadist Collar or Stormrage Talisman of Seething. They're very close. I actually think Sadist Collar is a little bit better based on how I value stamina. However, something important to note is that the Collar is way easier to get than the Talisman. You probably can get the Collar for free. Very little DKP in a DKP guild. There's probably not many people that know this thing exists. This is not a highly contested item. That is the reason I'd recommend going with it, even though it's close to Talisman of Seething. And personally, I think it'd be really nice to have a 2 crit neck. I mean, you're getting really crazy amounts of crit if you start stacking some of the crit items. But I do think the neck is going to be Sadist is better and less contested. Next, for Cloak, I do think Shrouded Dominion's a little bit better than Cloak of the Scourge. It's still going to be a medium upgrade, especially if you have Cthulhu's Cloak. If you're lucky enough to have Cthulhu's Cloak, it's really not going to be a big upgrade at all. So this is something you can prio in the small upgrade if you have a Cthulhu Cloak. But a lot of people are not going to have Cthulhu Cloak, and they'll have either Concentrated Hatred or like Cloak of Firemaw or something. It's going to be a decent upgrade if you do get this cloak from one of those. Again, Cloak of the Scourge is better value because no one wants it. Shrouded Dominion is highly contested. I do think Shroud is slightly better, but I would recommend Cloak of the Scourge because, again, the theme of this video is the Claw. Not that many people want it. The Cloak of the Scourge, no one really wants it. Sadist Collar, no one really wants it. Right? We just keep picking up items. Even Servo Arm on Horde side guilds, not that many people want this thing. Right? We're going down the list. We're sniping items that no one really wants. And that allows you to save all your DKP for Gressel or Kingsfall if that's what you're going for in terms of weapons. Or if you're following my recommendations and you're having Servo Arm and, Claw and then all these PvP items, you can splurge on basically whichever item you want at that point. If Servo Arm is really easy to get. So that's the goal. Next, on to the ranged weapons. We have Toxin Injector. Again, no one cares about this item. I'd really recommend getting Toxin Injector. It is very good, and I personally think it's a little bit better than Soul String. Soul String looks cooler. This is a very cool looking weapon. However, it is going to be an upgrade for a lot of warriors that don't have the Oro gun, so this is going to be more contested. So keep that in mind. That's why I'd recommend going for Toxin Injector. And you can see here, I mean, none of this stuff is contested. It's actually really exciting how many upgrades you can make to your character without spending a lot of DKP or without, losing a bunch of prio in a loot council guild. Next, we have nonbis offhands. I just wanted to mention these. Personally, I wouldn't be chasing these down too much, especially the last two. Harbinger is very good. I don't think Claw the Frostworm is going to be too terribly hard to get. But if for whatever reason you can't get Claw the Frostworm, it's not dropping, or too many people randomly want it, you can go for Harbinger of Doom. But I really wouldn't recommend Iblis or Widow's Remorse. I'll show you real quick the list of best offhands in the game. We obviously have Thunder Fury at the top. I forgot to include here, but keep in mind Thunder Fury is the best. Then we have Claw, Kingsfall, Then we have Harbinger of Doom, Death Sting, Maximus Fang. So like these are the best, right? And then all the way down here, you've got like, like why go for Iblis or Widow's Remorse for PvP? I wouldn't. I think even something like Pugio is something that might be easier to get. I wouldn't bother. But if literally no one wants Widow's Remorse, it is usable. It might be better than what you have. If you're like using Corehound Tooth, it's an upgrade in my book. So you will do more DPS with Widow's Remorse than with Corehound Tooth. And well, it's going to be similar amounts of damage, but you're going to get extra stamina. So that's, I guess, the way I would phrase it. You're going to do similar amounts of damage, but have more HP. So anyway, that's a quick detour to offhands. So you could also value here, put other things like Maximus Fang, right, around the nonbis offhand level. And for example, I think I was saying just a few moments ago that if you are in a situation where you're getting all these uncontested items like servo arm and all these Cloak of the Scourge and Sadist Collar, if you get all these uncontested items, you could even go for King's Fall as a Hemo Rogue after the Dagger Rogues have it, and you have a great offhand, and you can play daggers if you want. So that's another thing you can try and do too. Or if you're in a DKP guild, I mean, you could even just go straight for King's Fall. If you're going to save a lot of points on a lot of these other items. But again, the goal of this video is if you go for these less sought after items that are still BIS or very close to BIS, right? Like within a couple % of BIS, you're going to have a lot of extra DKP and a lot of loot prio. But let's go to tier. Now for tier, you got a bunch of pieces of tier. Now, while the ring is not a huge upgrade in terms of PvP stats, I do want to mention that if you are someone who is interested in mixing and matching Death Dealer set, the Bone Scythe ring, or even Night Slayer, you need Bone Scythe ring to be able to do that. So while tier 3 4 set is really, really good, in a lot of cases, there are going to be situations where you want the 4 set of tier 3 and you want Death Dealer, or you want the 4 set tier 3 with Night Slayer. You can only do that if you have the ring, the wrist, the belt, and the gloves. And of those items, the ring is definitely the hardest to get. So I do want to mention that the ring is definitely something worth picking up. And I did want to note that it's not a big DPS increase. And for a lot of you probably aren't going to prio it too terribly high because your character is not going to get much stronger just directly. But I would keep an eye on, swapping gear. I'm going to have a video on it. There's a lot of situations that you wouldn't expect where you might want to swap your gear out. And so I would recommend picking up Bone Scythe ring. If I were to move it to, if you were someone that wants to swap around gear, I would put it around like the medium upgrade category, and considering some of these items you can get for free, the ring is something you might want to prioritize. So just keep that in mind. Not over main hands or anything crazy like that, but the ring might be something you consider highly, especially if you want to combine tier 3 with other sets. But again, if you actually don't care about combining the 2 sets, if you just want to slap on your tier 3, forget about it. This is not a piece of tier 3 that is a significant upgrade. It's on the lower end. So if you're not planning to swap, this might be something that more people want. This might be harder to get, so keep that in mind. Or the rogues obviously want this one. And I want to just be clear. I didn't explicitly state it. The ring is different than the tier because it doesn't drop from a token. It actually directly drops. So this drops directly from Kel'Thuzad. There is no token process. That is why the ring is harder to get than the other pieces of tier, because it is more rare in that sense. Okay, now we got the list of stuff that I would recommend passing. These are all really good raid items. And while this neck, cloak, and ranged weapon are actually good in PvP, I think there's an alternative that's close enough that if you pass all of these items, if you're a PvP only player, you're really going to have a lot of extra prio to use on the items you want. Passing all of these is how you secure Gressel. It's how you secure King's Fall, Server Arm. If I were in a Loot Council guild and I were to go up to the class leader or whatever and say, you know what, hey, I want Gressel. and they say, well, yeah, everyone wants Gressel. And then I say, well, you know what? I'm prepared to pass on both trinkets. I'm prepared to pass on the offhand. I'm prepared to pass on, the ring, the cloak. You just list all of this. They're going to be like, wow, okay, this guy actually wants Gressel. You know what I mean? He's not just like everyone else who wants Gressel and wants a trinket and wants a ring and wants the offhand. This is how you actually can make strides in a Loot Council guild to get the items you want. Or if you're in a DKP guild, obviously you're not spending DKP on these items. You're going to have more of it to spend on the items you want. Okay, lastly, I wanted to mention the Boots of Displacement. These things exist. Snag them, swap them in. Personally, I use Dark Mantle boots right now on a macro with my goggles, my cat's eye goggles. So whenever I think there's a rogue around or I see a rogue, I'll press a macro that equips my cat's eye goggles and my Boots of Displacement. I'd recommend, if you do something like that, pick up the Boots of Displacement, upgrade over your Dark Mantle boots. It's the same stealth skill, but these are always nice to have, slap on, especially if there's a lot of enemies around and or enemy players and you're trying to do something sneaky. It's always nice to have stealth skill on your boots. And then lastly, this item exists. If no one wants it, you could snag it and mess around with it. Personally, I think Scarab is better for PvP, for trying to resist spells, right as you open on someone. But hey, this thing exists. But yeah, anyway, that is all. Again, the takeaway, I've said this multiple times. The goal is to get the best items and to get a lot of items because you're taking uncontested stuff. It's not greedy because you're taking stuff that is otherwise going to be unused, right? So just remember that your guild is actually going to be really glad that there's someone like you taking all these unused items and passing on all this contested stuff. You're going to make the guild's life easier by not having all this drama over trinkets and stuff, and you'll be able to secure the items you want. And I really do think that if you prio the right items and you pass on the right things, that you guys should really easily be able to pick up a lot of these uncontested items and get super geared out pretty easily, right? A lot of you can get the first Sadist Collar that drops, the first Cloak of the Scourge. A lot of you can probably get the first Claw. Some of you might be able to get first Servo Arm if you're on Horde side, depending on how many people in your guild PvP. That's crazy how many items that you might just be able to get really quickly. And then once again, I would just mention save tier for last. The only item you might want to focus a little on more is the ring, especially if you like to focus on swapping gear, because it only drops from KT and it doesn't drop from a token. But yeah, save tier for last. If you change guilds, if your guild disbands, whatever happens, you can always get tier in a new guild. You can always pick up tier easily, but it's going to be really hard to get the high prio items in a new guild. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope this helped. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and thanks for watching, guys.